Okay, well, first I would say I appreciate this opportunity to share my life story. Maybe it'll make up for the fact that I haven't done a really good job of keeping a journal or writing my life story, and this will be an easier way to do it. And I've had a number of people that told me that I should do this for my children and grandchildren, and so this is a good opportunity, and I appreciate it. I have had a rich and blessed life. There's been some painful moments in it, but overall, it's been a very good life. I started out as a spud. I was born in Idaho and lived there for the first 8 years of my life. And then my family moved to Portland, Oregon, which is where I felt like I consider where I grew up. My father was a school teacher. My mother was a stay-at-home mom with 5 children. We had a very modest upbringing as far as economics. Economic and lifestyle. We had a good, loving family though, and it was good. I learned at an early age to I think it must have been my parents' good teaching, I guess, to provide for myself. I actually started working in the third grade, or the summer after the third grade. I and others of my age would catch a bus like at about 4:30 in the morning, and we would go out to the berry fields. This is in the summer. And we first worked in the strawberry fields for a month, and then we worked in the raspberry fields for about a month, and then we picked beans for a couple of weeks, and that was what we did for the summer. And it was long, hard days. I thought during strawberry season I could make about $3 a day. Raspberry season was about $2 a day. Beans was the good season. We could make $4 to $5 a day, and I thought we were really rich. I thought I was really rich doing that. And then I also, somewhere along that line, I got a paper route, so in the mornings I would deliver papers and do that. And then when I got into junior high school time frame, I started mowing lawns for apartment complexes, and that was what I did to make money. And then in high school, I worked for different factories and companies and different things to make money. So starting in about third grade, I pretty much paid for everything that was my expenses, my clothes, my school supplies, when I was old enough to have a car and insurance and gas and those types of things. I knew that to go to college, I would need to support myself or find a way to get to college. So I worked at that as well. I thought I'd share an experience from my high school years that taught me a lot. And as I might have mentioned, that missionary work has probably been my favorite part of the church. Enjoyed my mission, and Jill and I hope to go on a mission someday, again, at least one. But something in high school an experience I had that I learned a few things on. I had a girlfriend in high school, and really good person, and she was not a member of the church. Growing up in Portland, Oregon, there were not very many members of the church at that time. In fact, my high school with 3,200 students only had 7 members of the church in the high school. And so occasionally she would come to church with me on Sundays, not because she was interested in the church, but just to be together on Sundays. But she had her own church that she belonged to. I had a couple that was the Sunday school class teacher for our age group, and this young couple had been on a mission. They were recently married and had a good spirit about them, and they, besides teaching our class, they were also had been called as stake missionaries, and their names were Craig and Bonnie, and every time, and my girlfriend's name was Betty, and every time Betty came to church afterwards, Craig would say, let Bonnie and I teach her the discussions. And I was afraid that if she was put in that position, that it would affect our relationship. and I didn't want that to happen. So I would always answer, no, she's not interested, even though she hadn't been given the opportunity to make that decision herself. So Craig kept putting so much pressure on me that finally I asked her one day, and I said it sort of like this: "You're not interested in learning about taking missionary discussions, right?" and she said no, she wasn't. And so I thought, okay, good. The pressure's off. I can tell Craig that I asked her, and she said no. And so that's the way it went for a while. And then we went to a youth conference together. And at the testimony meeting at youth conference, as it almost always is, the Spirit was extremely strong. And I felt the Spirit. I'm pretty sure that she felt the Spirit. And at that time, I wanted to ask her sincerely if she wanted to take the missionary discussions. And she said yes, she would. So Craig and Bonnie started teaching her the missionary discussions, and I would pick her up and take her over to their house to receive those discussions. She got a testimony and decided to get baptized. And I remember it was on a Saturday that she was going to get baptized, a Saturday afternoon. And that morning, that Saturday morning of her baptism, her former boyfriend went over to her house and spent the entire day trying to talk her out of getting baptized, and telling her all kinds of things that created doubts and questions. And when I went to pick her up to go to the baptism, she wasn't sure, but she went ahead. She had the faith and went ahead and got baptized. Once she got baptized, things really changed for her. Her best friend, who was also her neighbor and had been best friends for years, quit speaking to her. And she was a cheerleader at the high school and was among the popular group. And all of her friends at school ostracized her and quit associating with her. Obviously, this hurt her deeply, and her best friend Sue was the one that was behind this. And so I went to Sue one day and I said, "Why are you doing this?" And she says, "Well, because you believe this, and this." And she listed all of these things that she had gotten from anti-Mormon material. And I told her that that is not what we believe. And she says, "Well, then what do you believe?" Great question. So I says, "Well, and at that age, I didn't have answers and the confidence to answer that. So I said, well, I know this young couple that can teach you about what we believe." So she agreed. So we started taking her to Craig and Bonnie's house for the discussions. Sue ended up joining the church. Her boyfriend ended up joining the church. And then they had friends that took the discussions and started joining the church. One day I was at basketball practice and I'm running laps after practice with one of our team members who played football, basketball, and baseball with me, who I never thought would have been interested in the church. And he said, who is the Lord of the Vineyards? And I was puzzled by that question. And I thought, in his world, probably Gallo Wines was probably the Lord of the Vineyards. But found out that his girlfriend had been one of these people in this chain that had joined the church, and now he was taking the discussions and reading the Book of Mormon and come across the Lord of the Vineyards in the Book of Mormon, and that's why he was asking. He ended up joining the church. Betty's boyfriend, who tried to talk her out of getting baptized, ended up joining the church. By the end of that year, 33 kids had joined the church. And Many of them I know went on missions. Many got married in the temple. Many of them stayed strong in the church throughout the years. I don't know all of them, and haven't been able to follow them. But I know that great things happened, and I was the one who tried to stop it. Tried to stop it all from happening by being afraid of what the gospel might do to our relationship. And when I went on my mission, Betty got married to somebody else, but she got married in the temple, and now she and her husband serve in a temple presidency. The guy that played ball with me, he went on a mission, and he's raised a great family in the church, and many great things have happened. Since that time, I've learned not to be afraid to share the gospel. And I've had thousands of opportunities that I've done that through the years. And of all of those opportunities, I haven't had a bad moment, a bad experience, except once. And one time I did. But other than that, I've learned not to be afraid, because there's nothing bad that happens, and sometimes there's many good things that happen. And I've been very grateful for the opportunities that I've had with missionary work throughout the years, and not all of them leading to people joining the church or accepting the gospel. In fact, most not. But it has been good, and it has been worth it. So don't be afraid to be a good example, and to open your mouth and share your beliefs. Through high school, my dad was also a coach, and instilled this athletic background in our family, and all of us played different sports. I had three other brothers and a sister. I was the oldest of five. And I played football, basketball, and baseball in high school. And I was able to get college scholarships in all three sports, and enjoyed that very much. Basketball was my favorite sport at that time. Probably baseball was my best sport as far as my potential. But as it worked out, I ended up playing football in college. And so the only major college that offered me an opportunity to play both basketball and football was Utah State, and I considered that. But I ended up going to BYU on a football scholarship, where I was a quarterback. In high school, I also think because of my parents, the way they raised us, I worked hard in school and ended up being the valedictorian, a 4.0 student coming out of the largest high school in the state of Oregon. And I was also able to get leadership and academic scholarships offers in college. So I did go to Brigham Young University on a football scholarship, where I played quarterback. My freshman year at BYU, back then the NCAA didn't allow freshmen to play varsity, so all the schools had JV teams. So I was the quarterback of the JV team my freshman year. And then in the spring, and then the head coach got fired, the varsity got fired at the end of that season, and Lavelle Edwards took over as the head coach. So in spring practice, Lavelle Edwards was the new head coach, and there was three quarterbacks that coming back that were to be seniors the following fall, that all had experience as the starting quarterbacks at some time in their career. And in spring practice, I had a good spring practice. Probably going into too much detail, but in the spring game, I was 11 for 11 passing, and at the end of spring practices, Coach Edwards sat down and met with me and told me that that they decided that I was going to be his starting quarterback for the next fall, but he wanted to make sure that I didn't have mission plans. And so back at that time, and for several years prior to that, if you went on a mission, you were done with football. There was no scholarship when you got back, and there really wasn't return missionaries on the team, except for a few walk-ons, because the belief was that if a mission hurt you in football, and you just weren't going to be a very good football player after a mission. So Coach Edwards reminded me of the policy and suggested that my mission would be helping us become a good football team, and that's what I should do. I wasn't sure. I'd always thought I was going to go on a mission, but I wasn't sure what to do. I knew that I liked and wanted to play football. Also knew that the scholarship was quite important. Paid for my college, and so so I was a little confused. And I went back to Portland that summer, and my father, who was a school teacher, he went to Utah State for some summer school classes that summer. So I lived with my friend from our ward there. His father was the bishop of our ward. He was a baseball player, and he was planning on going on a mission that summer. His older brother got home from his mission that summer, and he had gone to BYU on a football scholarship and gave it up to go on a mission. So in that household, there was a lot of emphasis on missions, and my family was supportive of whatever I decided. And it was a hard decision. Coach Edwards called me every week to make sure I came back and that I made the right decision. So I ended up deciding to go back and play football, and I went back, and the week before the first game in a scrimmage, I injured my throwing shoulder, and I missed the first 3 games of the season. And then when I came back, the first week back, we had another scrimmage, and I re-injured it, and I missed the rest of the season. At the end of that season, I felt like I should go on a mission. And so I told Coach Edwards, and he said, well, you know the policy. He said, no promises. Just see me when you come back. So I got my mission call. I went to the Colombia-Bogota mission. That was the only mission in Colombia at that time, and I'll get to that in a minute, but I guess I'll go back to finishing up with college. And I got back from my mission. I saw Coach Edwards. He gave me my scholarship back. I was the first in several years to get their scholarship back after a mission, and after that, he changed his policy and he started giving scholarships back to all the return missionaries. When I got back from my mission, Gifford Nielsen was pretty much entrenched as the starting quarterback, and he later became an All-American and a Heisman Trophy candidate and played in the NFL for a few years. And I ended up being his backup, and I got to play in a lot of games. I had a lot of fun times, a lot of good experiences. Went to some bowl games. It was good times. I did play ahead of Mark Wilson for a year or two, and he had a great college and pro career. And I played ahead of Jim McMahon for 1 year, and he had a great college and pro career. So it was it was a good experience, and developed some great friendships and learned a lot of things from that experience. In college, when I went on my mission, assumed that I was going to follow my father's footsteps and be a teacher and a coach. I had two mission presidents. The second one was a businessman, and he had a lot of influence on me. When I got back, I decided to change and go into business, which I graduated with a degree in business management and minors in economics and accounting. And because I had 5 years of football scholarship with my redshirt year with the injury, I took advantage of that and finished the first year of the MBA classes. But then by then I was married and had a child and did not do the second year, so I never finished the MBA program. I went to work. Well, my mission experience was fabulous. Even though I probably would have had a better athletic career had I stayed, I'm glad I went. I think everybody who can should go on missions. It's a wonderful experience, and it's worth all the sacrifices. In Colombia, the church was new at the time. It had only been in the country for 10 years. In fact, it had been against law for any religion other than the Catholic Church to be in that country until 10 years prior to when I was there. So we did not have wards and stakes in church buildings. We only had branches and districts. We met in small little houses with these small branches. When I first got there, almost every branch's branch president was a missionary. And the members were just learning about the church and the operation of how the church works. And so it was an interesting experience with the investigators. They needed to have strong testimonies to join these small little branches when all of their friends, family, and neighbors belong to these large Catholic churches. But it was a great experience. One of my favorite experiences in the mission probably was towards the end of my mission. My companion and I had been zone leaders in Bogota, and we both got transferred to be companions again as zone leaders in Medellin. And Medellin was a beautiful city, and it was called the land of eternal spring because it was like 72 degrees there every day. It was a terrific place from an environment standpoint. It was the drug capital of the world, so we had that element to deal with. But Medellin was the most difficult city in our mission as far as missionary work goes. In our mission, we averaged, as a mission, 7 discussions per week per companionship. In Medellin, the average was 2. In the mission, the most that anybody had ever taught discussions per week in the mission was 20. In Medellin, it was 8. Medellin was a city of over 1 million people. We did have a full zone there with, I think, 8 or 10 missionaries and one small branch. The small branch had about 20 people that attended. Of the 20, there was 2 priesthood holders. There was a branch president who couldn't read or write, had no leadership skills. And there was a 19-year-old young man who had just joined the church. And I go back and just say, during my mission, they changed the rules so that no missionaries could be branch presidents to teach the local members how to become leaders in the church. So that was what we were dealing with there, and kind of an attitude amongst missionaries that missionary work couldn't be done in Medellin. So I've been reading Parley P. Pratt's autobiography my companion had been reading about Wilford Woodruff and about all the miraculous missionary experiences they had. And so we thought, they had difficult circumstances and they had great experiences. Maybe it's part of what's the lack of success has to do with attitude. So at a zone conference, we gave talks about positive mental attitude and about working as if everything depended on you and praying as if everything depended on the Lord and having that partnership. And I got a missionary name tag that said Elder Parley P. Pratt. And he got one that said Elder Wilford Woodruff. And we gave the zone presentation, and we told everybody that by the next zone conference, we would teach 20 discussions in 1 week. And the zone conferences were monthly, so we gave ourselves 1 month to get 20 discussions in 1 week, which was the mission record. And so everybody thought we were a little crazy. But we started working hard, and the last week before the next zone conference, we taught 20 discussions. Sorry. We taught 20 discussions. By the next zone conference, the next month, our zone average was 20 discussions per week. Between all the companionships. My mission ended soon after that, and 10 years after my mission, we had a mission reunion. And I asked our mission president, how many Medellin was doing, and he told me that they had just split the stake and now had 2 stakes in Medellin. So that was a lesson learned by me, and a great experience to see a start of something big that happened there. There was a lot of great people that we taught and accepted the gospel in Colombia. That helped be a catalyst for other mission or church experiences I've had throughout my life. My career, when I came out of college, actually Gifford Nielsen, the quarterback, was a friend of mine. His agent owned a shopping center company. And he told me about his agent's company, and I told him that sounded interesting, and the next day he called and asked if I wanted to interview to go to work for his agent's company. So I did, and I went up they were based in Salt Lake, and I was still down in Provo. I went to spend a day interviewing with several people with the company, and then they asked me to take the next day and go with them up to Kalispell, Montana, small town in Montana where they had a mall, and the vice president wanted to take me with him on that trip, said that it was a continuation of the interview process, that they wanted to get to know me better and me to get to know their operation better and to go up and visit this mall. That ended up being quite an interesting experience and quite an unusual start into a career. I'd never considered that as a career. I didn't know what I was going to do. I assumed I'd be working for some large corporation coming out of college. But we went up there, and they had a meeting with all of the merchants in this mall. And the mall manager set up at the front table along with this vice president. And during this meeting, all of the retailers started complaining about the mall manager. And they had a lot of complaints. And then this vice president said, well, that's why I'm here today, to make a change. And I'm sitting in the back of the room. And this poor mall manager, that's how he learned he was getting fired. And so everybody turned around and looked at me, and it was a pretty awkward moment, to be honest. But by the end of the day, they'd asked me to be the mall manager of that mall, and also the marketing director for that mall, and also the leasing agent for that mall, which usually is 3 different positions, but small town and small mall. So I ended up accepting that position and moved to Kalispell, Montana in January, when there's like 4 feet of snow everywhere. And I've said sometimes, if I'd known all of the if I'd really thought about all the decisions that I've made in my career, I probably wouldn't have made a bunch of them. But on the other hand, they all seemed to fall together, so I guess that was the way it was supposed to have been. But it was kind of crazy. They gave me a pickup truck with a snow blade on it, and they says, when it snows, plow the parking lot. So I guess that was another job that they gave me. And the first snowfall, I got up, in the middle of the night, and went out there and started pushing snow. And after a few hours, I realized this little blade made a very small dent in that parking lot, and I needed to call in the big equipment to get it done. But I started out there. I learned a lot up there in that town. I made some crazy mistakes there, such as had a midnight madness sale where all the stores were open till midnight, but I had forgotten that all of the electricity in the mall was geared to shut down at 9 o'clock, and all the stores lost their power. And I was at home, and I started getting a lot of phone calls from the merchants who were quite upset because all the customers left. But, there's well, I won't go into all the experiences, but anyway, it was I learned a bunch, and I was only there for 6 months. During that period, we had 9 of our leases come up for renewal, and the vice president that was my boss, he had given me parameters on how much rent I was supposed to get in the renewal process for their leases. And so I knew enough about negotiating that I felt like I will start high above that, because there's probably going to be some give and take, and to get down to those numbers that he gave me. I was able to renew all the leases on all of those stores at higher numbers than what he had given me, and later learned that he gave me high numbers, thinking that that's where I would start and I would come down. So anyway, he liked what I had done. So they promoted me, and they brought me into the home office in Salt Lake, and I became kind of like the right-hand man for this vice president. So all of our property managers and leasing agents who reported to him through me, and I learned a lot helping supervise all of those people. And the company was buying shopping centers across the country, and they eventually bought about 8 shopping centers in the East Coast, and decided to open up an office in Virginia. And they moved me to be the head of the East Coast office and to run the office there in Virginia. And so I moved to Roanoke, Virginia, and ran that office for 2 or 3 years. Then the owner of the company got leukemia and swiftly passed away, and the company started having some problems at that point. And so I started looking around for other jobs, and ended up finding a job with a company in Kansas City. They were a pretty large, substantial company. They owned 12 regional malls at that time, or 15 regional malls. They had about 12 strip centers. They also owned thousands of apartments, and they owned 8 different banks, and they owned lots of things. And when I say it was the most unusual experience that I've ever had in the business world, because they were 2 people. It was two people who were related, two men who were related that owned all of this. And most companies with all of that would have a huge home office staff. Well, it ended up that the home office staff was the two of them and one person who acted as receptionist and secretary for them. And they hired me to come in and help. So I became the third person in the office from the management side of it. I was over all the malls, supervising the management and marketing and security and maintenance of all of the malls. And then I had all of the strip centers and 5 of the malls that they assigned me to lease. And one of the owners leased the other malls. Huge opportunity and challenge for somebody who is still in their 20s. Typically, that would be somebody very experienced. But the reason I found that they gave me this opportunity is because I was young and I was cheap. and that's the way they ran their business. I was to hire mall managers and marketing directors at about half of what the going rate was in the industry. And everything we did was keeping everything as cheap and as economical as we possibly can. And so I learned a lot on that from that standpoint. And I had tremendous responsibility for a fairly young and inexperienced person, but I grew a lot and learned a lot, way more than most people my age would have had an opportunity to. So it was a great learning experience for me. After I'd been there 2 or 3 years, a company came after me to hire me. And it was a company based in Detroit, Michigan area called the Taubman Company, which was the leading developer of upscale malls in the country. And I went up on a recruiting visit, and they offered me a job that doubled my salary, and to become a leasing agent for their company and leasing these upscale malls around the country. And I liked living in Kansas City. I enjoyed the people that I worked with. I enjoyed my responsibilities. I enjoyed the ward we were in and the friends and those types of things. So I was very reluctant to leave. But at that time I had 3 small children, and I felt like economically I needed some more money. So so I went to the owners and I told them of the offer that I had received, told them that I wanted to stay there, but I needed some more money. Well, having that everything is really cheap attitude that they had, they says, well, let us think about it. And they came back and they gave me a small raise, and they also gave me a loan. They loaned me a car. Found out that they're through their banks, they loaned money to car dealerships, and they didn't own cars. They got the car dealerships to give them free cars to drive. So they got another free car to drive that they let me have, and with the small raise. And so I decided to accept that and stay. And then about 6 months later, the company in Detroit came back and doubled their original offer to me. At that point, it was very attractive, and I knew I couldn't go back and go through that process again, so I accepted the offer. And we moved our family to the Detroit, Michigan area, where I became a leasing agent for this large mall company that had the top malls in the country all over the United States. Most of the leasing agents there were in their 50s and 60s, had been in the profession for many years, and very experienced. I was able to learn a lot from them. But my first year there, they had, I broke the record for most leases done by a leasing agent in their first year with the company. And my second year there, I did more leases than all of the 20-some leasing agents they had in the company. I outperformed all of them as far as number of leases went. And they even gave me the responsibility of working with department stores, which previously to that, only the owner did. So I was establishing myself there, and it was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I was achieving some success there, and I was on a good path with the company. Then at the time, there was two guys in Memphis, Tennessee, who had been developing traditional strip centers, just grocery store anchored centers and discount department store type centers, but they wanted to start doing upscale centers, but they didn't have the background. And they contacted me about coming down and joining them. And so I explored that. I went down and met with them in Kansas City. They offered to match my salary that I was making in Detroit and give me a 5% ownership in their company. And so I thought of that as an economic opportunity and a challenge, an industry challenge to start a company and build it with them. And so I accepted that. I moved the family down to Kansas City, down to Memphis, Tennessee. And we started working on these upscale centers. This upscale outdoor open air center was a entirely new concept in the shopping center industry. Nobody had done those before. It was a challenge because they would cost twice as much as a traditional strip center, but we had to get rents like mall rents rather than strip center rents, which were like double the traditional strip center rent. And so it was a difficult challenge, and also to do a product that none of the retailers had ever been in before and were nervous about, because they liked the security of being with all the department stores in the malls at that time. And so I was able to leverage some of my relationships that I'd developed in the upscale retail world, and worked hard, and our first center, I got it quite a ways along being leased, but we couldn't get financing because all the lenders were afraid of this new product that was more expensive, and if it didn't work out, that the rents wouldn't support the cost, and so we couldn't get any financing on the first shopping center that we were working on. So I ended up calling my old boss from Kansas City that owned banks, and I asked him if he would finance this shopping center for us. And he asked me how much we had leased, and I told him I had most of it leased, but the leases weren't signed yet, but I had commitments from the retailers for most of it. He asked me how much it would cost. He asked me what our rents were and our pro forma and a few other things, our net operating income projections and all of that. I gave him the answers, and he says, "Are your partners good guys?" And I said, "Yes." And he goes, "Okay, we'll do it." And that was the start of a new concept in the retail industry, which I named a lifestyle center. And we trademarked that name, but we didn't protect it, but it became a name that defined that type of shopping center. And the same people, my former employer, financed our second shopping center like that as well. And then after that, the traditional lenders were interested in the product, and the retailers wanted to do more of these. When I first started doing a lifestyle center, there were about 50 regional malls, enclosed malls being built in the United States per year. And most of the mall developers felt like our concept would never make it and couldn't compete with them. That totally changed as we grew fast and started doing the lifestyle centers, then other people started doing them as well. And now in the past 15 years or so from today's date, I think there's been 1 or 2 regional malls built in the United States, and at least 100, probably 200 lifestyle centers. So it completely revolutionized the shopping center industry. And then we became the leading developer of lifestyle shopping centers, and really became the leading developer of upscale shopping centers of new development, because that's all that was being developed at the time. Because of that, we got quite a reputation. I was being interviewed and was on the cover of the Wall Street Journal, New York Times, all the trade magazines, and those types of things, and got a reputation as being an innovator in the industry. There's a trade organization called the International Council of Shopping Centers. It's a worldwide trade organization with 70,000 members. And it's based in New York, but they asked me to be on the board of trustees for the International Council of Shopping Centers. And then they made me an officer, of the vice president, and then a member of the executive committee and the government relations committee. And with those responsibilities, they had me traveling around the world, the United States and the world, training shopping center executives. And around the United States, primarily on the lifestyle centers, but around the world, just on shopping centers in general. And that was a great experience. It was a tremendous experience, and the people that were on the board were the leaders of the top businesses in the world, from Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley and Wells Fargo and those types of companies, from the finance side to the Nordstroms and Saks and Target and those types of Gap and Limited and those types of retailers to the developers, the top mall developers in the world. And great experience, great association, loved going to all the board meetings. They were terrific. We continued to build the company, and it grew and grew. It became a national company. We were developing all over the country. And then in 2006, well, we go back to 1995. In 1995, we were developing one of our, I think it was our 3rd or 4th lifestyle center, and it was a big one, and it was in the Kansas City area. And I got contacted by Brigham Young University to be their athletic director. and sorry, Tyler just fell asleep, fell off his chair. And anyway, BYU, they sent the advancement vice president out to Memphis to interview me, who was in charge of the search committee for athletic director. And I spent a day with him, and then he had me come back to Provo, where I spent a day with Rex Lee, who was the president of the university, interviewing with him. And then they contacted me back again, and I knew at that time they'd narrowed it down to 3 candidates. I was one of the 3 that they were considering. And they interviewed me again and told me they wanted me to come back and do a final interview with the rest of the committee and I think some general authorities and for the position. And it looked like the position would be mine if I passed those interviews successfully. And so that was a gut check. I really wasn't sure what to do because I was personally guaranteed on a $100 million loan on the Kansas City project, and I was in charge of its success. So that was a huge risk. Plus, the potential income that I could make, what I was making and what I could make, was substantially more than what BYU athletic director would get paid. And but it was so interesting and exciting to me that I was very torn. And so I asked the university if they could wait a year and let me finish that project and just hire an interim AD until I could finish that project. And they said no, they needed to make that decision and move on. So So they did, and so I passed on that. But so my career continued. In 2006, we were growing very rapidly. We had $2 billion worth of developments under development or in pre-development stages. And the financial rewards from that were tremendous. It looked like myself, I should go back. Early, once I joined the company, the other partner that we had, one of the partners and I bought out the third one, so there's just the two of us as we grew the company through those years. And then we were grooming his son to take over the company down the road. My partner, Dan Pogue, was 11 years older than me. And by 2006, he was pretty much retired. I was running the company and grooming his son to eventually take my place someday. So in 2006, life was great. It had been really good for 20 years in that industry. It looked like it was going to be good for the next 20 years. And it looked like we were going to make a killing financially and do some really good stuff. And then, this I haven't told to many people, but I'll put it on record now. In the middle of the night, I had a voice that came to me. And it said to sell out now. And it was pretty clear to me that that's what I was supposed to do. So the next day I went and met with my partner and his son and told them that I wanted to sell. And they said, "Why would you want to do that now?" And I just said, it's been good. It's been good. I'm ready just to get out, and I'm willing to sell my interest to 40% on the dollar of what our projections were going to be of what my income would be over the next couple of years. And they were really shocked about that. It's sort of like, why would you do that? And I didn't believe that they would understand what I had to say. Plus, I didn't want to scare them. I just felt like that's what I needed to do. So they thought that would be a great opportunity for them to get my equity at 40 cents on the dollar. So they went to JP Morgan. They raised the money to buy me out, and I sold my interest in the company. They wanted me to stay on, and so they gave me an employment contract for 3 years to continue as president of the company. And I continued to work there for the next 3 years. But during that time, in 2007, the crash happened in the real estate market. And not only our company, but everybody that was a developer had substantial problems and issues. So I understood why I was directed to get out when I did. Most companies either went bankrupt or came close to it during that period. I ended up loaning a lot of the money back to that company to keep it afloat during that period, which ended up being a gift because I never got it paid back. But and at the end of the 3-year period, I retired from the shopping center industry as an active participant. I still had equity in some shopping centers. I still was involved with the International Council of Shopping Centers. I resigned from the board, but I still attended board meetings and kept the relationships. And I was still on the board of our company, which was called Pogue and McEwen Lifestyle Centers. And I was vice chairman and continued that way for another 3 or 4 years before I resigned from that. so that pretty much ended my shopping center career. At the time, I thought I was going to move to California, where I had several children and grandchildren. I went to California. I made offers on homes there. I had a yacht, and I moved it from Florida down over to Newport Beach. But I couldn't find, none of the offers I made were accepted. Things weren't working out very well as far as that move went. My parents lived in Utah. Once my dad retired, they went on a mission to Jamaica, and then they moved to Utah. And they were elderly. My dad was in bad health. They wanted me to be close. And so for some reason, I had this idea in my head that I never want to live in Utah. I liked living in the mission field, and I just didn't want to be around all those Mormons. So I finally says, okay, I'll move to Utah, but I won't live in a Utah subdivision. So I was divorced at the time, which I'll get into, and I moved to Utah, and I bought a home at Sundance Ski Resort, and I loved it. It was a beautiful home, great location. I loved everything about it, and started developing some relationships in Utah, and being able to be around my parents on a regular basis for the first time since high school. And I was able to spend, about 3 years with my dad before he passed away, which was great. And I've been able to spend time with on a weekly and regular basis with my mother since then, which has been great. But as I came out here, I did start dating and meeting people, and eventually found my wife, Jill. When we started talking about getting married, I assumed she would just love living at Sundance as much as I did. But she wanted to be around people in the city, closer to things. Plus, she had a son in high school, and she didn't want him to have to commute all the way up there down to high school. So, we talked about me wanting to live there, her wanting to live in the valley, and we compromised, and I moved. And we got a home in a Utah subdivision, but it was a real nice home, and it didn't feel like a subdivision. So it's been a great home for our family. Our kids and our grandkids love it, and it's been great. Back to the career. When I came back to Utah, I didn't have any intentions of actively working again, but I was investing in lots of companies. I was on some board of directors for some companies, and I had a brother-in-law that wanted me to invest with him in disposal wells, water disposal wells in North Dakota in the oil fields. And I went up to North Dakota and looked at it and got interested in it, and came back down to Utah, and I was telling a friend of mine about it, and he said, well, if you're interested in that, you need to meet a certain individual who he introduced me to. And that individual owned and had founded a engineering company that dealt with water treatment, primarily in the oil fields. And he liked me. The company I found was basically a lot of engineers that were good at developing technology and machine and equipment, but weren't great at running a company. So he hired me to come in and be the president of the company. I also invested and brought other people in as investors into the company with me. And so I became president of the company. It was a difficult company for me to run because I didn't have an engineering background. I didn't have an oil background, and I was able to help format a company and how it should be run and all of that. And I did put a lot of structure and that in, but I realized I was over my head as I couldn't speak the language that well with the customers or with the engineers, and so I was probably a little bit out of my element. Over time, I realized that, and I brought in somebody to run sales, and then eventually I went to the board members and suggested that they replace me with this guy and promote him in as president of the company, and then I would just stay on as a board member, which is after I was president for 3 years before I did that, and then he took over. The company ended up still struggling. It eventually perfected its technology and was a very good product, but just as it reached that point, the oil industry collapsed, and all of the people in the oil industry shut off their acquisition of new products and equipment and downsized, and they were laying off everybody and shutting down operations, and so it was bad timing. And so that company in the last short period of time has now gone out of business. And so anyway, it was a learning experience for me, but it wasn't my best business experience. After that, I was trying to decide whether I wanted to do something again or not. And one of my sons, Mason, is an actor, and acting is an on business and off business, and he's very talented. And he had started at one point in his life drawing on shoes and being able to sell them, but the hand drawing process was not a way that you could sustain a business that way. It was too labor intensive. But I went to him and I thought, since he has time besides his when he's not doing the acting, that he could do stuff, and that he had a talent that way. So what if he did the creative side and I ran the business side? If we could figure out how to scale and mass produce custom art on shoes. We got together, we started working on it, we figured it out, we engineered a solution, and we started hiring some people and found a location, and in the last year we have opened a year ago we opened a business called Soul Kicks, which is a custom printing shoe company. That we custom print anything on shoes that individuals or companies or organizations or schools might want on their shoes. And so we have been working on that for the past year, and that's currently what I'm doing. I'm the CEO and president of that company, and we're continuing to build that. During the meantime, I've got investments in probably 21 different companies and sit on a few boards still. And so that's kind of where my business career has been and where it's at today. I don't know how much longer I'll be doing this. We'll see. When I was in college, I met a girl from California, and we got married. We had 8 children. Our children have been, for the most part, very successful with both their financial status as well as in the church and in their lifestyle and just being really good people. Even the couple that are not active in the church at this time are still good people. And I'm really proud of them. I love them, all of them. The ones who are married have most of them are married now, but they've married good people and they've raised good kids, and I'm just really excited about our kids and our grandkids. My wife Jill has 6 children, and her husband died at a young age with cancer, and she raised 6 children by herself and did a great job. And Jill and I have a wonderful relationship. We get along very well, and I think our whole blended family of all of us get along really well, and real happy with how well our blended family fits. My youngest son, Dallin, just had twin daughters a couple weeks ago, and that makes 24 grandchildren for Jill and I. And I've got another one coming in a couple months. That'll be 25. 22 of those 25 are from my side. 3 are from Jill's side. We have a lot of fun as a family when we're together, and we try to get everyone together as best we can at least once a year. And they're spread out all over the country, but we enjoy being together, and again, just great family, which I'm very thrilled with. Sad that marriage to my children's mother didn't work out. That's that's a painful spot in my life, but I'm glad that everyone's doing well. Other things that, interesting or not, in my life, I'm not sure. I just feel like it has been a blessed life. I love the family that I came from. I love the family that I have. I love the gospel and the eternal nature of the gospel. Growing up, as I mentioned, didn't have a lot. The first time I ever recall, and I think the first time that I ever went to a waiter-waitress served restaurant, when I was a senior in high school and college football coaches started recruiting me and took me to dinner. The first time I went to dinner, it was actually Lavelle Edwards who took me to dinner, and I was scared to death. I didn't know how to act at a restaurant. But first flight I ever took on was when I was being recruited in football, and they flew me to visit colleges. So, when I finished high school with my bachelor's degree, the dean of the business school at BYU, I finished first in my class in the business school in the undergrad program, and he was highly encouraging me to go to Harvard to get my MBA. And that time, just coming from that naive background that I was at, I was scared to death of that. I thought, there's no way I could go out in the East and compete with all those smart kids and those rich kids and all of that. I just couldn't fit in that environment. And now when I look back throughout my business career, that's who I dealt with my whole career, was those people. And because of the career and church and everything else, and I've had great experiences in my life. I've been able to, this summer we went to Maine, which was the 50th state I've been in, so now I've been in all 50 states. I've been to 45 countries on 6 continents. Antarctica is the only continent I haven't been on. I've had great friends and great relationships, and it's just been wonderful. And just, again, I feel truly blessed, and it's been a great life, and I don't know what the future is going to bring, but I'm hopeful it'll be good, and mainly I hope that it'll be good for my kids and grandkids. That's what I pray for all the time. So answering that question about advice for somebody starting a career, there's a couple sayings that I didn't invent these, but I've adopted them and I believe them. One of them is whether you think you can't, or whether you think you can, or whether you think you can't, you're right. And the other one is this is referring to obstacles that come up and people who tell you no. It's no doesn't mean no. No just means figure out a way to get a yes. And and those have helped me in my business career many, many times, where I've just willed my way to success by working hard and trying to be smart and trying to develop relationships. Those are three key things. And the other two key things, I think, is three things, I guess, is prayer, trying to live the commandments, and paying tithing. And I have a very strong testimony of paying tithing. I think the Lord, I believe what the Lord says in Malachi, that He'll open up the windows and pour out blessings. And it doesn't necessarily mean monetary blessings, but there's blessings that come from paying tithing. And I did have somebody once said, when I was in the shopping center business, he says, your partner's very lucky. And I said, why is that? And he says, because he has a partner who pays tithing. Which I thought was kind of funny and also insightful. But I believe that keeping the priorities first are very important. I did have a sign on my desk for years that said, the main thing is to keep the main thing the main thing. And I think if we keep our priorities right and try our best to live the gospel, that the Lord will bless us and will be successful. On the other hand, I think you have to be very smart, very diligent, and choose good people to work with. I think you do want to keep those who are around you as quality people, and recognize their achievements, their success, their part in your success, and have a team approach. You can't do it on your own. So value those that you're working with and let them be part of the success as well. As far as just success in life in general, I think that's an easy one. It's not that easy to live. There's an easy outline, and that outline is the gospel of Jesus Christ and the structure that the church brings to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And if we'll follow the prophet and follow the leaders with faith and with diligence and are doing our best to be obedient, that happiness will come into our lives. Peace and happiness will be in our life. And when that's not part of your life, there's a lot of pain, and there's a lot of sorrow, and there's a lot of hurt and heartache. And I've had that side too. And but it's great to know that the Savior's there and the atonement is there for everybody, and we can take advantage of that and have that that joy and peace in our life. And without it, you can be searching forever for that, and you just won't find it. That's where it's at. I haven't always made the best decisions, and everything else hasn't all been rosy. I've shared mostly success things today, but there's times when I didn't make the best decisions. There's been pain. And I'm sorry for any for the pain that I may have caused for kids and stuff like that. Even today I don't always do everything right, and I wish I made all the right decisions, but I don't always make all the right decisions. So I am grateful there is a Savior and an atonement for that. I am grateful that I have good kids and grandkids that are wonderful. I have a great wife, and just feel like life is pretty good. Now I do say everybody's life, and this is for kids and grandkids. It's never easy. There's always obstacles, there's always setbacks, there's always hard things to deal with. And nobody's going to have a pain-free life. Nobody's going to have an easy life, but you work at it, and you can get through it, and you do the right things, and you'll get through it, and life will be worth it. I might tell you a little bit more about Jill. Jill is a special person. As I mentioned, she raised her 6 children pretty much by herself. I think her children ranged in the age from something like 4 to 16 when her husband died. All 6 of them have been on missions. All of them have graduated from BYU except the youngest one who's on a mission currently. The ones that are married have been married in the temple. They're active, all of them are active in the church. Jill served a mission in Pennsylvania and has been just a stalwart in the gospel, and a great example to me and to many others, and a very fun person to be with. She majored in recreation management at BYU, and she's really good at throwing parties and having fun. Just a quality person. So I did want to mention that. All right, so maybe this is my deathbed wishes. The final thoughts on my family and on just my look at the world in general. I've learned a lot over the years, and one of the things I've learned is to embrace diversity. There was times in my life where I thought everybody should be pretty much the same. And I've learned that that's not the way the world is, and it's not the best way for the world to be. It's funny that growing up pretty much in the same environment, each of my children are different. And they all have different personalities, they have different strengths and different weaknesses and different things that they add to our family. And at times I probably didn't embrace the direction that some of them took. And now, as I look back on life at this point, I do embrace that diversity. I do embrace them choosing what their path is. And I love and accept each of them for who they are and what they are. I love every one of them. Every one of my children, and I've learned so much from all of my family, my extended family, my immediate family, and those I've been associated with through the years. The main thing that I want each of them to understand and is that it's just how much I love them, and even though they're at the really very difficult stress points in my life where I wasn't at my best, sometimes they may not have felt that, but over time I've grown, I've learned, and I want them to know that they all are very much loved, and I wish the best for each one of them, proud of them and proud of where they're going in their lives. Other than certain stake leadership callings and nursery leader, I think I've had most church callings. I have been a bishop, and I've been a counselor a couple different times, both in a family ward and in a YSA ward. I've been a high counselor 3 times. I've been a stake mission president. I've taught a lot of classes, and I've done a lot of different things, but probably my favorite callings that I've had has been in the missionary field, being ward and stake missionaries and teacher of the gospel principles class. It's just something that's dear to my heart and something I enjoy. As far as my family background, my family, on both sides of my family, the McEwen family and the Dobson family, both were early stock in the church. They were part of the early pioneers that joined the church and crossed the plains, and part of the early settlers in Utah, and so I'm grateful that for what they did and the generations that followed them that stayed active in the church, and that I was able to be raised in the church. I always wondered whether if I hadn't been born and raised in the church, whether I would have accepted the gospel if missionaries came knocking on my door. I don't know whether I would or not. So I'm grateful that I didn't have to make a wrong decision on that. That I was able to grow up in that kind of an environment with that family, and then I gained my own testimony on my own. This is through, when I was in high school, I had a lot of questions. I questioned a lot of things, and some of them were kind of silly questions, but just because I didn't know better and I didn't understand. But some of them really puzzled me, and I tried to get answers. And eventually, I would get those answers, and I felt like the Lord was guiding me along the way, and just line upon line and piece by piece, I was getting my testimony. One of the big challenges of that, which just helping me with my faith, came when I was trying to decide what college to go to. Between my junior and senior year in high school, my father, again, was taking summer school classes at Utah State, and our family lived there and on campus at Utah State. And my mother's family was all from the Logan area, so they were big Utah State fans. And I worked out every day in the summer with the Utah State football and basketball teams, and they're the only, like I mentioned, I think they're the only college that said I could play both football and basketball, and gave me scholarship offers in both sports, which was very interesting to me. And at the time, Utah State had better football program than BYU did, and so and they were promising me that they were recruiting me as the only quarterback they were recruiting to come in and take the place of their All-American quarterback when he graduated. And so that all sounded very good and very enticing to me. But when I took my recruiting visit to Utah State, and I think the environment's different now, and I'm pretty sure it is. I've been there and experienced it. But at the time, it was a little rough. And they only had one member of the church on the team, and he was not active. And all of the football players were required to live in a football dorm there at the time. And on my recruiting visit, rather than putting me at a hotel, which most colleges did, they had me stay in that dorm for the time I was there. And the one night that I was there, the whole team went out to a party and all got drunk. And so I really had to start thinking about that, is how would I deal with that environment? Having to live in that situation and being with that kind of peer pressure. And I was really because I had pretty much decided that's where I was going to go. And so I remember leaving that night, leaving the dorm and walking across campus. It was early morning hours, right after midnight, and and knelt down and prayed. About it. Somebody came walking over and asked if I was okay, if I was sick or something like that. And but I think the Lord gave me direction and answers to the prayers that led me to where I was supposed to be. And nothing against Utah State. Still like it as a school. Still would have been happy if my kids had gone there. But for me, at that time, I think that was the right answer. Anyway. Another part of my career, which was a brief moment in time, and this is while I had the shopping center company, is I decided to start a smoothie company. And at the time, the smoothie industry was fairly young. There was a few Jamba juices, and in Utah there was a few Zuka juices. And in my travels, I came across both of those and loved the smoothies that I had. And I thought, well, what if I started this smoothie business and became the Jamba Juice of the East Coast and the South, and build it up into a large company? And I did this business projections about building it up to a 500-store chain and selling it and making a gob of money and having fun. And so we got started in that, and we started dabbling with it, and first started making smoothies, and all over the kitchen we had blenders and fruit and juices and everything else, and kids helped out, and we did that, and I hired a designer out of California to design a smoothie restaurant for us. And my youngest son at the time, Dallin, was only 4 years old, and we had a name search that we went out to everybody trying to find out what we should name it, and Dallin came up with this name, says, let's call it Smooth Moves. And we all thought, okay, that's a cool name. so we called it Smooth Moves, and we opened up 8 stores in a year and a half. The goal was to get to 500, and the person that I had hired to run it, he probably wasn't the right person, because he wasn't prepared didn't have management experience and wasn't prepared to manage it. Once we got to a certain point, it was too much for him, and he had a nervous breakdown and just walked away from the business. So that left me with these restaurants that with hundreds of vendors, hundreds of employees, and thousands of customers that I didn't have any time to run. So I ended up selling that business, and it was a brief dabble in the food business. Anyway, I learned a lot of lessons on that. One was not to do it again. One thing I've learned through my business career is you can have a lot more success if people trust you and if you're honest with them. And when there's bad news, you got to deliver the bad news. When there's opportunities to shade the truth so that you can gain a sale or gain a business success, if you aren't honest, it usually comes back, and if you are honest, it usually comes back to bless you, because people learn about those things, and it always pays to be honest, even if the short-term results may be negative. And I got in the shopping center industry A lot of it, the shopping center industry is about leasing. It's competition. When one of our shopping centers is competing with another shopping center for the retailers, for the tenants, it can be very intense competition. And there are a lot of liberties taken amongst leasing people to shade the truth to get those tenants to come into your shopping center. And over time, I feel like the reason we were successful as the retailers learned that they could trust us, trust me, trust us, and therefore we were able to get their loyalty. And even when the bigger mall developers came after them and put a lot of pressure on them, most of the time I was able to get them to come into our shopping centers, and that was very successful. So that principle of trustworthiness and honesty was very helpful.